Welcome back to Fox Recaps. Today, I'm going to explain the movie Shaolin Wooden Men, released in the year 1976. The movie revolves around a dumb orphan Shaolin Kung Fu student named Little Mute. He's new to the Shaolin monastery, so he struggles to keep up with the other students and to complete the grueling tasks assigned to him by his instructor. One day, the Shaolin master orders his students to fetch water from the river while wearing heavy iron shoes. Master explains that being weighed down, they must have to focus their strength on their feet in order to walk. This is fundamental to the Shaolin weightless technique, which would make the disciples light as a bird and make them able to walk on rooftops and water. Little Mute's classmates let him collect water from the stream first and challenge him to reach the monastery before them. He accepts the challenge, but his classmates effortlessly beat him. Moreover, he trips on the steps and rolls down. Dejected, he sits by the river and gets lost in his thoughts. Soon, he starts thinking about his late father, who was viciously murdered by a masked bandit. It turns out the bloody event traumatized Little Mute into silence. Meanwhile, a nun watches Little Mute from a distance and eventually approaches him. She introduces herself as the Five Plums, a friend of Shaolin Master who lives in the Lotus Nunnery. She tries to motivate him and reminds him that Shaolin Kung Fu has a long history and it's very difficult to master. It takes great perseverance and determination to scratch the surface. The woman's words move him and he decides to finish his task. However, he still finishes last and the master scolds him. He calls him lazy and tells him to get out of the monastery. Hearing this, Little Mute falls down to his knees and apologizes to the master, pleading with him to let him stay. The master eventually agrees to let him stay and orders him to chop wood as punishment. Later, while chopping firewood, he again gets lost in his thoughts and pulls out a necklace which belonged to his late father. Suddenly, a drunken monk shows up and Little Mute gets back to chopping wood. The monk gives him a lecture about Shaolin before parting ways. Drunk out of his mind, he can barely walk straight. Worried, Little Mute follows him and the drunken monk inadvertently leads him to a secret cave behind a waterfall. There, he finds a man imprisoned. The imprisoned man yells at two young monks who bring him food and water every day, ordering them to bring him wine. As soon as the monks leave, Little Mute helps the man eat the food, instantly winning his trust. After finishing the meal, the man tells Little Mute to bring him wine the next time he visits him. Later that night, the monastery's best fighter, Jung-On, challenges Wooden Men Lane, a narrow hallway containing 36 Shaolin Wooden Men, which are mechanical dummies that attack anyone who enters the hallway. Turns out that whoever defeats the men are allowed to leave the Shaolin. Little Mute and his mates fondly watch the battle, but Jung loses the fight and is left badly battered. The master priest chastises him for overestimating his abilities and tells him that he will be punished after he recovers from his injuries. The next day, Little Mute saves a bun from his lunch for the prisoner. He also covertly steals the drunken monk's alcohol. Expectedly, the prisoner is delighted and asks him to bring more wine the next time. He also promises to repay him generously when he is pleased. The man then asks him why the two monks didn't visit him today, and Little Mute reveals that Jung unsuccessfully tried to fight the Wooden Men Lane, and everyone at the monastery were hooked to the battle. This makes the prisoner laugh as he finds it amusing how a man can lose to a bunch of wooden figures. He claims that if it was him, he would have taken the wooden men apart. When Little Mute finds it hard to believe, the prisoner explains that he was jailed because he was practicing a new technique called Lion's Roar. Once he succeeds, he'll be able to crumble any metal just by roaring. The prisoner then promises to teach Little Mute how to fight the wooden men once he's pleased. The following day, Little Mute again tries to steal wine from the drunken monk but ends up getting caught. The monk beats him up and teaches him a lesson. He also orders him to clean the kitchen every night as punishment. Later, Little Mute spends the entire night cleaning. Impressed by his work, the drunken monk gives him a fruit and tells him that he doesn't need to clean the kitchen anymore. Following this, Little Mute heads straight to the cave and gives the prisoner his fruit. Pleased, the prisoner says that they met each other because of fate. He then asks Little Mute what he has learned during his time in the monastery. When Little Mute tells him that he can't learn Kung Fu in the first 5 years of Shaolin, the prisoner tells him to ignore the rules of the stupid priests and finally offers to teach him Kung Fu. However, he clarifies that he doesn't need an apprentice, so he will only teach him a form of Kung Fu. They start right away, and Little Mute begins covertly training for the lion's roar. One day, the Shaolin nun from earlier sees Little Mute practicing these killing techniques. Little Mute bows down before her, seemingly pleading with her to keep his secret. The nun then explains that what he's been practicing is indeed Shaolin, but it's very vicious. She says that martial arts are a way to keep fit and healthy, and he must think righteous thoughts because his state of mind will affect his situation. She tells him about a technique called the 8 snake steps, which she says is useful in killing. The nun offers to teach him the technique, which clashes with those of the prisoner's killing style. Nevertheless, Little Mute happily agrees, and he begins to study both styles. Over time, Little Mute masters both the techniques. Seeing this, the prisoner becomes delighted and announces that Little Mute is finally ready to pass the test of the Shaolin Wooden Men Alley and leave the Shaolin. Before Little Mute leaves, the prisoner gives him a paper rolled into a ring and asks him to give it to the lame cashier at the Evergreen Medicine Shop. In the next scene, Little Mute enters the Wooden Men Alley. A long struggle follows, but in the end, he successfully fights his way through the alley and wins the challenge. Before leaving the Shaolin, Little Mute seeks the Master Priest's blessings. The latter asks him who's been teaching him Kung Fu, since he's the first student who managed to beat the Wooden Men in years. The Master Priest eventually figures out that Little Mute somehow found his way to the Forbidden Cave and prays to God for forgiveness. He then asks if the prisoner gave him anything, but Little Mute doesn't respond. Before parting ways, the Master Priest reminds him that Kung Fu is to improve physical and mental health, and using it for evil purposes will cause death and disaster. To use it for righteous purposes will restore justice and save lives. The Master Priest also gives him a bamboo scroll and tells him to go to Windy Hill and ask for the Sublime Master. Following this, Little Mute heads to the Evergreen Medicine Shop and hands over the item to the cashier. It's revealed that it contains a secret message, and the cashier takes it to the members of the Green Dragon Gang. Meanwhile, Little Mute starts living at an inn after he saves the owner's daughter, Orchid, from some goons of the Green Dragon Gang. Elsewhere, the prisoner perfects his lion's roar technique and uses it to escape. One night, the goons of the Green Dragon Gang again go after Orchid and eventually kidnap her. Later, they demand a 500 taels ransom. When Little Mute and the inn owner's son go to pay the ransom, they come across the prisoner fighting the monks from the Shaolin by himself. Unaware that the prisoner is the leader of the Green Dragon Gang, Little Mute distracts the monks and helps him escape. Afterwards, they tell the prisoner about Orchid and he promises to help them. Following this, the group spend the night at a local's home, and there, the prisoner shocks Little Mute by killing the homeowner's brother when he mistakes him for a monk. Afterwards, the prisoner kicks Little Mute and Orchid's brother out of the house. The duo then go to the king's grave to pay the ransom, but no one comes to collect the money. Surprisingly, when they return home, Orchid also returns back. Later that night, an old man picks a fight with Little Mute at the inn. The man is also good at martial arts, and Little Mute gets the feeling that he's the one who killed his father. In the next scene, Little Mute finally decides to take the bamboo scroll to the Sublime Master at the Windy Hill. When the priest reads the scroll, he learns that Little Mute is the prisoner's apprentice. As a result, the priest chastises Little Mute for following the wrong path, but nonetheless promises to reform him. Following this, the priest starts revealing the story of the prisoner. He reveals that he was once the head abbot of the Shaolin, and the prisoner, who used to be known as Stubborn, was his student. One day, Stubborn went renegade and formed the Green Dragon Gang. However, he was soon captured and imprisoned. The head abbot felt responsible for the student's misdeeds, so he blinded himself and left the Shaolin monastery to live as a hermit, appointing the current master priest as the new abbot. However, he promised to help Shaolin in the future if it was needed. Soon, the master priest joins Little Mute at the Windy Hill and reveals that Stubborn has reunited with his gang and started seeking revenge from people who were responsible for his imprisonment. He speculates that they can attack the Shaolin any moment. He also expresses his concerns that the monks are not strong enough to fight Stubborn, as he has now mastered the lion's roar. In the next scene, the Hermetic monk hands over a book containing the ultimate martial arts style, and Little Mute masters this style under the guidance of the current head abbot. When the escaped prisoner comes to destroy Shaolin, Little Mute stands ready to defend it against his former instructor. It is also revealed that Stubborn is the killer of Little Mute's father. Just then, Little Mute discloses that he is not mute, but he swore never to speak until he found his father's killer. Soon, an intense fight ensues, and Little Mute counters his opponent's killing techniques since he knows all of them. He creates multiple openings but fails to exploit them due to the Shaolin nuns' teachings, which said never to kill his opponent. Despite this, he digs down deep and somehow manages to win. He offers to spare his former instructor on the condition that he returns to the Shaolin for the remainder of his life. The escaped prisoner says that he is beyond salvation, but also mentions that he is happy that his student has learned so well. Just when Little Mute is distracted, Stubborn makes a final attempt to kill him. He grabs Little Mute from behind and attempts to crush his throat, but the latter moves out of the way and the villain strikes his own throat, causing him to kill himself. Deprived of its leader, the Green Dragon Gang flees and abandons their plans. The movie ends as Little Mute returns to the Shaolin Monastery, where he is ordained as a monk. That was all from the video. I hope you liked it. Subscribe for more content like this and hit the like button to help us out. Also, leave a comment if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Until next time, take care.